Okay, guys, it's Mrs. Benshoff, and I wanted to talk about our part two for Ralph Pomeroy's Corner. And so we've spent some time annotating the poem, and we talked about how the figurative language adds this sense of, I guess, tension between the conflict. And so, or it adds tension between the cop and the speaker. So it intensifies that conflict. So that might be a good way for us to jump into part two. So in part two, I want you to write an analysis of the figurative language. And I included, I believe, 3 questions that follow that. And that's really just to jog your thinking. It's not like you have to answer those specifically, but the idea is that you're analyzing what you have read. And so before we jump into that, I just want to review the C model. So we open up with a statement, and this is your topic sentence, your interpretive claim. This is where you name the author and the title. And so it's not okay to just say the figurative language helps paint a picture in our mind. Like, that's a no-brainer. We understand that. It does that in any poem that it is included in. It's also not okay to just say it adds detail or it helps us to understand, because then my question becomes, it helps us understand what? Well, it helps us understand the situation. What situation? So you have to make sure that you're being specific. What does the figurative language specifically do in this particular poem? That's what we're getting at. That's an interpretation. So in your statement, you're going to name the author and the title and state your interpretation. And then you're going to include an example. This is always a quotation for me. So you'll want to make sure that you introduce your quotation with the speaker's name and that you follow it by a page number if it's a book or short story. And in poetry, we use line numbers. And then we explain how this quotation proves our interpretation. And so this can be a little lengthy at times. And so just because there's 3 parts, by no means does this simply mean 3 sentences. There's just 3 components to your written analysis. And all of this is so important to me that if you don't include a quotation, even though this might be spot on and this might be spot on, you're looking at a 76% typically. So make sure you include those quotations. So let's write our poetry study for corner. So I'm going to pull that up. And, these are the things that we talked about. We did that in the other video. And so if at any time you need to pause and write, that's fine. Pause the video and write. I'm just going to continue on for the sake of time. But first we have our statement. So we have, in his poem Corner, Ralph Pomeroy uses figurative language to intensify the conflict between the cop and the speaker. So notice I've named Corner, and I've named the poet, and then I've given an interpretation. I don't just say the figurative language helps us understand what's going on. I tell you exactly what it does. It intensifies the conflict between the cop and the speaker. That's an interpretation. That's not something you get the first time you read the poem. Now we need to go back to the poem, and we need to find an example that shows an example of figurative language that does in fact intensify the conflict. So there's a lot of them we could use. Maybe his glance accuses me of loitering. That would definitely be one that I could see working well. Or the fingers armored by his gloves splay and clench, itching to change something. Or even the next line, as if he were my enemy or my death. That would be another really good one to use. The sun surrounds me, divides the street between us. That might work well. I like this one a lot. It is like a bull ring as they say it is just before the fighting. Like we know these moments are intense, and at any moment they could break out into a fight. So I'm going to use that one. And again, I want to make sure that I'm introducing the quotation. So I have the speaker says, comma, it is like a bull ring as they say it is just before the fighting. And I have L here for line, and then 21 because it's line 21. So I could have used really any of those that we talked about, but I liked this one a lot, so this is the one that I chose to use. And again, feel free to pause so that you have time to write and you can get caught up. Continuing on then, we need to make sure that we explain how this quotation proves and proves the statement, intensifies the conflict between the cop and the speaker. So I say, by comparing the situation between the two to a bullfight, the speaker suggests that the two men are ready to fight one another, and at any moment the stare down will erupt into violence. In doing so, the conflict between the two is heightened. So I have my example, and I like to repeat what they're doing, to say specifically what I'm analyzing here, because I could say by using the word bull ring or by, saying fighting. But here it's a little broader than that. So I say by comparing the situation between the two to a bullfight, the speaker suggests that the two men are ready to fight one another, and at any moment, the stare down will erupt into violence. In doing so, the conflict between the two is heightened. So I have my statement, I have my example, and I have my explanation, which all make for a really great C model response and a good model for you to follow. Thank you. If you have any questions, let me know.